Hello and welcome to Tea with a Therapist number 20. I'm Phil Naylor and today's Father's Day. And I'm a father and I have a father. Well, my father's passed, but I did have a father. And so I get to talk about fathers today. Why not, right? And today I'm supposed to be relaxing. Looks like I'm relaxing, but I've been having a busy day actually. So this is my little time to rejuvenate myself while you join me for a cup of tea. Bring your cup of tea over and we'll have a chat. I'll have a chat about fathers today. And well, what can we say about fathers? Fathers are an archetypal figure. So if we talk about Jung and archetypes, what are archetypes? Archetypes are kind of like instinctual ideas. They're things that were kind of hardwired into us. So certain things like mother and father are the kind of archetypal archetypes. They're the primary ones. So Jung would say we kind of are born into the world kind of looking for a mother. We kind of have some already idea of a mother that we need, and we're looking for one when we're born. And so, and we also have archetype for father. And these are, you might say, these ideas kind of evolved over time, and that it became part of the universal experience, human experience, to have mothers and to have fathers, to experience mothers and fathers. And so, so the whole thing about archetypes and different like archetypes and instincts and all those things are kind of a whole other subject. You might say that the lower down the food chain we get, the more things are just driven by instinct, that they're born into the world, they're kind of like programmed. So you might say we have a mother and a father program, just like when animals are born into the world, they have an instinct about how to survive, about what to do, what kinds of foods to look for, what kind of habitat they need, and all those sorts of things. So lower down the food chain you are, the more they're kind of programmed biologically just to not think so much, just to do and to kind of find. There's kind of like these little living programs that are going about their business surviving in the world. So as we get older, or as we kind of go up the evolutionary chain, I suppose, we have our archetypes, which are kind of inborn ideas. So so the idea of the father, you might say that kind of, when you look at society, that kind of drives a lot of things. You might say that the whole notion of kings and chieftains and things are derived from the archetypal father. The sort of, because the archetypal father is that which, if the mother is the giver of life and the nurturer and the giver of sustenance, the father is sort of the one that's out there protecting and going out into the world and guarding, and the ones that are trying to bring abundance into things. So from a tribal sort of ancestral point of view, that's kind of the roles, traditional roles of mothers and fathers in that role. So we grew up with those sorts of ideas, and so we derive those ideas: the king, the leader, you know, the guider and protector. So a good king is supposed to be able to protect the land and look after the people and provide for the people and all those sorts of things. And they're given almost like a reverent status, a godlike status, which is, again, sort of God the Father, the idea that God was the archetypal father who are looking after us and protecting us. So these are sort of these ingrained ideas. And so it's from these ideas that sometimes we derive some problems, because I'd say that most people that come in for therapy have problems with their parents on some levels, mothers and fathers. The primary one is the mother. We can blame everything on the mother, but often fathers too. Like, and it's all about, you know, what parents did or didn't do, or what they should or shouldn't have done. And in a lot of ways, like when we grow up, the father and mother figures are these sort of kind of godlike figures. There's these all-powerful things. They look after us, they provide for our needs and all these. And so we have this archetypal image, and Jung would say we project that image onto our parents, that we have an idea about how they should be. and what our ideal of them be. And for a while they match that, and then we start to notice that they don't quite match our ideal of what they're supposed to be. And sometimes they're doing what they're supposed to do, and sometimes they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And so it's that's that first primary relationship that gives us our first sort of disappointments, our traumas, depending on how our parents interact with us. They imprint on us. They imprint on our psychology. How they treat us, positively or negatively, provides a primary imprint on us. And our parents kind of always have a particular role all through our lives. We may always be like a kid around our parents, around our mothers or our fathers, and sons tend to kind of be comparing themselves or putting angst against their fathers, as opposed to, women tend to put that against their mothers, although it's not all universal. These are kind of generalizations. So our father and mother relationship, this Father's Day, so I guess I'll talk about fathers more. We define ourselves against our fathers, and we have expectations, and we find as we grow that we may be disappointed. This father didn't match up to who I thought a father was supposed to be, or conversely, we've idealized our fathers, and we always feel like we're in the shadow of the father, and we're always comparing ourselves and coming up short against the father. If you had these successful fathers, you see these about people with Hollywood parents or famous parents or presidents or something, and the kids are always kind of living in the shadow of their parents. And in the case of the father and a son, they're sort of struggling against that, and we're always trying to find our identity against parents. And so people come to therapy, being angry about their parents and what they did or didn't do, and what they should or shouldn't have done, and how it's affected them and how it continues to affect them. So people have these ongoing relations. They can even when they're fully grown adults into their 60s, even 70s, or they're around their parents, they still feel kind of, have this psychology against their parents. And so, but parents have made an important role in us, in who we are. And they give us a gift by both not just the positive, but also the negative things. Because the negative things that happen to us are the things that actually make us grow. We have to struggle against those negative things. It's the traumas in our life. We always think about trauma as a negative thing, and it's something we certainly have to overcome. But traumas are something that we can't avoid, that are part of life. But those are the things that help us grow when we overcome them, when we learn to integrate them properly into our psyches. And we need to integrate our parents properly into our psyches as well. When we really grow is then we break through of our attachment to the image of our parents and who they are, that we no longer measure ourselves against our parents. When we start to, this is what I guess Jung would call, again, the process of individuation. That is of becoming truly yourself, truly an adult, truly yourself. When we become a complete individual, and part of that process is necessarily breaking away from parents and finding our own identity. And as long as we're kind of stuck against our parents' identity, or always thinking about how they're impacting us or how we're struggling against them, we're not quite individuated. And so that's a little hint that we need to kind of detach from parents when we find that ourselves, that positive or negatively, we're either idealizing parents or are resentful about parents and always, emotionally reacting against our parents. And there's a couple of stages where this naturally happens. One's the teenagehood, right? That's a natural part. Step one of individuation is then the rebellious stage. We have to sort of not do what the parents want, and we have to strike out on our own. But we're still defined by our parents. They still have the rules and all those sorts of things. And so we become young adults in our 20s, and I think it's, again, usually in about the 30s when we start to have our own kids, that comes another process of individuation, that I notice that kids need to break away again from parents more, because they themselves are now the parents. They have to say, I'm a parent and I have a parent, and then but then their primary focus is on their own kids and being a parent, and they need to assume the role of the parent. They have to take that torch from their parents and become it themselves, and they become the parent. And now they're struggling against that sort of, you know, who's in charge, who's really, you know, who's the real parent around here, right? And so at the 30s, I think there's a kind of another breaking away, another kind of rebelling against who your parents are, and probably, you know, rejecting a lot in some ways, you know. And all that, I think, is normal. And when I think back to my own process, I did all that same stuff, right? And so, but I think when we truly individuate is that when you start to see your parents as just people, and when you know, where you take all the emotional attachments and all that away, and you start to see them as you would see like your neighbor or somebody you work with or your friend, and you kind of see their life differently. You see that they're no different than me, and you can appreciate the challenges that they may have gone through when you say, what was I doing at that age, and how would I have reacted to the same stressors, and how would I have been, and all of that. And then you start to cultivate a different appreciation. You become kind of your own person, and then you can appreciate your parents better as the people that they are. You appreciate them in a new way, in a different way, outside the parental role, just as them, as a human being. And I think that's part of what we need to do. And I was starting to say we have the gifts that we get are both from also the negatives, that are the things that our parents disappoint us and didn't do, because those are the areas that we have to stretch and grow into. We stretch and grow into with Leonard Cohen, you know, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Or that, you know, where our bones are broken, when they heal, that's where they're strongest. So we define ourselves, we become ourselves through our challenges, and through the challenges that our parents present us in, again, defining us versus our parents. And there's always, when we stop blaming our parents, we start to take responsibility for ourselves and who we are. And we realize that however we've been reacting against our parents, positively or negatively, it's kind of our own projection, and it's our own stuff that we have to deal with. So that's not to say, you know, that's why there's all this kind of idea about forgiveness, not about parents, but anybody who's done kind of anything to you. And people say, would you want to forgive people for these awful things? Because some parents, let's face it, there's some horrible parents. There's parents that should have never been parents. But even though sometimes you will see celebrities or what I'm talking about, horrible childhood they had, Oprah is a case in point. She grew up in a very dysfunctional home, and she was sexually abused by a family member, and she had a lot of parents. But completely forgave all of that. And as a matter of fact, she said, I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for those experiences. How can I completely reject all of that out of my life? Because I'd be rejecting who I am. And so we take the negative and we take the positive, and our role is to kind of break away from our parents, see them as individual humans, and that's when we become fully ourselves. And so I've had to do that. I hope my kids do that, and hopefully you're doing that. And I help my clients do that, because they need to stop defining themselves against their parents and really start to say, I'm really the agent of my life. I'm not just kind of a reaction to what happened to me and what happened in my childhood and all of that. And that's part of me, and I can't deny that, but I have to not define myself against that anymore. So those are my words of wisdom about fathers and parents and everything at this moment on this Father's Day, as I contemplate being a father and have had a father and a grandfather and all the fathers down the pipe that have had to kind of work with their family and their growing up and their growth years. So if you're a parent, you know, of kids, you know, and you want to take the torch from your parents and be prepared to pass it on to your torch, because that's passing it on to the new generation. The new generation comes up, they're the kind of leaders of the world, and the older ones kind of pass the torch on and diminish in the world. Their influences become less, and then the younger generation comes up. Everybody's passing the torch to each other. So, you know, take that torch from your parents and get ready to pass it on to your kids. And just do the best you can. You know, everybody who's a parent tries to be the best they can, and even if you had a crappy parent, at some point along the way, they probably tried their best to be a parent somewhere along the line. And some people really appreciate the things that their parents does, but I think everybody in their own way tries to be the best parent that they're able in their own particular circumstances, given their own parenting that they themselves had. So here's to fathers and to moms. Everybody's a parent and who's struggling with all this role. Good luck, and you too must individuate and be your own person. Be your own person. Thanks for joining me. If you can relate to any of this, just leave a comment and share, give a like, whatever. And I'll see you next week. Thank you.